Hi, welcome to Season 2, Episode 4 of Impact Effectively. I've called this season of podcasts Impact Around the World because I'm speaking to friends and associates all over the globe, finding out how they're making an impact using NLP and other complementary approaches. If you've not been watching or listening to earlier podcasts, my name is Florence Madden. I'm an NLP trainer and coach based in Cumbria in the north of England. I'm also the author of The Intention Impact Conundrum, on which this series of podcasts was originally based, and the co-author with my friend Eleni Sarantanu of a book called Everyday NLP. So this week, I am delighted to be speaking to my friend Alannah, who is right over on the other side of the world from me, unfortunately, in Wellington in New Zealand. Alannah will tell you all about herself in a moment, but she is the director and founder of the Kaleidoscope approach. So she'll tell you what that's about. So it's over to Alannah to tell you all about how she makes an impact and indeed more about the Kaleidoscope approach. So Alannah, over to you.
Thank you, Florence. It's so wonderful to be seeing your beautiful face again and to be connecting. It's really wonderful. And while I know many people have found technology frustrating in these times, it is also amazing how we can connect right across the globe. And I miss you too. And when I see the courses that you're going to be running up in the Lake District, it brings back so many memories of the wonderful times and experience I had with you in such beautiful surroundings. And it is with those learnings that I feel so much richer having moved to New Zealand from London at the end of 2019. And after 20 years in corporate, working for various multinational organizations, took the courage to continue the learning journey on my own with Kaleidoscope approach, which I think is pretty apt given while a common name for New Zealand is the land of the long white cloud. For me, it really feels like the land of the rainbows. For I have never seen so many rainbows as I have in my time here already. And rainbows and kaleidoscopes, both things that play with light and give us different perspectives on things.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. So when I think of impact, for me, it's pursuing a real passion in helping people overcome challenges, helping teams continue to grow and move forward in finding those new perspectives. And in these times, much of my time is taken up with helping both teams and individuals, looking at it from the lens of resilience.
Yeah, it's such a hot topic, and as you say, kind of these times related to the pandemic, but I guess you reflected on your own corporate life as well. It's not just the pandemic, is it? There are so many other challenges that people have in life and in work, and particularly maybe corporate life.
Very, very definitely. I think someone once said to me many, many years ago that we weren't put on this earth to be comfortable. And one of the definitions that I particularly appreciate about resilience is that it is through mastering the challenging situations in life that we are able to grow.
Yeah.
And so, as you say, completely, the world has been, I think, united with a common experience with the pandemic and having to really sort of, testing our resilience and building our resilience in that. But life is a constant learning journey. And so we all face challenges of different types, different sorts. And as you taught me so beautifully when I was introduced to NLP, is we all have a different map of the world. We all see the world differently, and with that, different things are challenging to us. So for one person, it might be something that another person actually finds exciting. Or something that is relatively simple and easy for a person to move through, for another person stops them in their tracks. And so in thinking of it like that, whether it's our personal lives, whether it's at work, and regardless of that work, we all face challenges, very, very definitely.
I also like that suggestion in what you're saying, that challenges aren't just, if you like, kind of inconvenient or horrible things. There's actually learning in them, and that's actually taking quite a positive way to look at it. And from an NLP point of view, we often talk about the positive intention behind something, and it seems to me that seems to be your approach, is to see what the learning is in something, rather than just look at, how can I look in the opposite direction, or how can I just get round or over this challenge. So
it's funny you say that, actually, because I was just speaking with a client yesterday who has been having to navigate a particularly challenging situation at work. And what I find generally with my coaching clients is just providing that space for quiet reflection. And sometimes a little bit of a gentle challenge helps them take a step back, take a deep breath, and get that perspective and find a way through. And what was so wonderful with this client yesterday was reflecting at the end of the conversation on something that had felt like an immovable obstacle, stopping them in their paths. They actually realized that they were already in the process of moving beyond this. So that was the first recognition. The second was that this was something that wasn't just a negative, but that they were learning from it, and to quote them, that they were stronger for it. And in that they were actually more resilient than they thought they were.
That's a lovely thing to help someone discover. So I'm curious to know more about how you approach this whole idea of someone tapping into their resilience. So how do you do that, whether you're working with groups or you're working with individuals? What's your approach there?
Thank you. Oh, what a juicy question. So, well, first of all, it's such a privilege for me to be working with both individuals and teams, and in those spaces of trust, and in giving them beautiful generative attention, helping them reflect. So there are two parts or two ways that I go about this. The first is on an individual level. And in that individual level, in that space, is whatever they are working through, whatever they're going through, or another way of looking at it is what's taking up their headspace. Is for them to share that with me, and using a variety of NLP techniques, as well as positive psychology and transformational coaching techniques, which you introduced me to and taught me NLP. I had the privilege of meeting Joe Lanigan, who introduced me to transformational coaching. And a third component is through the wonderful Candace Smith around the thinking environment. And the combination of all three of those in that space very gently sort of taking off the layers to be able to understand what is going on in the here and now, and what can that person find within them to help them move forward.
Yeah.
The second component is with teams. And with teams, I have a little bit more of a structured approach, but I don't like to call it training. It's more of sharing.
Okay.
And it's a sharing around some of the research in neuroscience to help understand what is going on with our brains when we are experiencing challenge.
Yeah.
What is going on for us both mentally, but also physically. And with that knowledge, with that greater knowledge, is then being able to identify some of those patterns that come up in our lives.
Yeah.
And whether those patterns are helpful or unhelpful. And with that perspective, being able to decide how they move forward.
Yeah. I love that idea that you've talked about in terms of layers. And you mentioned thinking environment, and well, you know what a fan I am of Nancy Klein, whose work that is, that creating that space where people can think for themselves, where people have time to think, time to give their point of view, and do that in a space where they are, what they're saying is accepted and not judged. So that's such a lovely environment. But then you talk about these layers and helping people to understand more about, and you mentioned about the patterns, and NLP is so much about recognizing the patterns of behavior that aren't working for us and finding ways of changing that. So I just love that. I think because as I was listening to you, the word that came to mind was enlightening people and giving them the space to be enlightened about themselves and make choices. That's lovely. So tell me more about, you've talked about working with individuals and teams. How do you manage your own resilience? And how do you tap, maybe I should say, how do you tap into your own resilience?
There are well, first of all, I do believe in walking the talk. So the techniques and the tools that I use with clients, I definitely use them myself. And and with that is, so first of all, stopping and really taking that breath. I know it can sound cliched, but actually it gives us that moment to interrupt whatever pattern is going on, and to give us that opportunity to take stock of the situation, and in NLP terms, move from being at effect back into being at cause.
Okay.
And for me, that's really important because, and I see it so often in the clients that I work with, when we feel like we don't have control in a situation, or we are losing our independence as an individual, that is when we can really start feeling challenged. Yeah. And remembering that we all have a choice in how we respond to a situation. Yeah. It's so powerful. So one thing that I really try and bear in mind is that NLP belief of the person with the greatest flexibility is the greatest influence. And that idea of no matter how big the storm is in life, if we remember our values and think of those almost as roots going deep down into the ground, and know that is holding us and rooting us, that no matter how the wind blows or how the storm may rage, we can bend and we can move with that storm, but we can come back to center. Yeah. So taking a deep breath, taking stock of the moment, remembering my values. That's one thing that I really do keep in mind generally. The other thing that, and bear with me here because it may sound a little strange, but it's something that my daughter and I do together, and that is around our worries. Because sometimes it can be the niggling little thing, or it could feel like a big shadow that follows us, the thing that keeps you up at night. And with our worries is to name them.
Yeah.
Sounds a bit strange, but believing that a worry is not going to go away if we try and avoid it, or we try and ignore it, or we try and squish it down. But if we turn and face it and give it a name, it both humanizes it, and it also, as part of that, is recognizing the positive intent, because it's trying to protect us. It's perceiving our brain is perceiving some form of threat, and that is what is causing the worry. It might be a fear of losing independence. It might be a fear of losing love or being alone. It might be a fear of losing power. Whatever it is, there is a positive intent. So first name your worry, and then asking it a few questions. What needs to happen for you to let this go?
Yeah.
Or what could be the worst thing that could happen?
I love that. So do you have a specific name, or does each worry have a different name?
So it's strange, actually, because mine tends to have a consistent name, as does my daughter's. So my daughter's one is Bob, and mine is Mr. Puddles. Again, totally random, no idea, but when I asked it what its name was, that's what it was.
Wow.
So yes, so that's another technique that I use. And all joking aside, I actually used it the other day when I was going to be running a session with a team and was feeling a little anxious before it. It was remote via Zoom. They were going through a particularly challenging time and weren't very cohesive, and I could feel this worry coming up. So asked Mr. Puddles what was going on and what would be the worst thing that could happen. Now, that was with a little bit of a breath, because to entertain the thought of what is the worst that could happen. But funnily enough, by bringing it to the surface and challenging it, I asked then myself, well, Mr. Puddles, and what next? So if the worst thing happens, what will you do next? And in that process, it was amazing, because that feeling of anxiety just went away. And instead, I felt even more equipped because I had thought through these potential scenarios.
Oh, I love that. So this is really trusting the unconscious mind, because that's what you're giving voice to, or allowing it to say its piece. I really, really like that. It actually reminded me of some years ago. I was in India, and I'm a bit of a wuss when it comes to lizards and things like that. And at night there were little lizards on the wall of the bungalow that I was in, and which kind of kept me a bit awake at night. They're completely harmless, but that didn't make any difference. And one of the delegates on the course said, give it a name. Or there was two of them. So there was Jerry and No Tail, and I said good night to Jerry and No Tail, and they said, yeah, well, we've got mosquitoes to catch, we've got stuff to do, you just go to sleep.
That is wonderful.
Yeah. So I still remember Jerry and No Tail, and found out later that they lived behind, during the day, that they lived behind the mirror in the bathroom, which was fine. We all need our space.
That's such a beautiful story.
And you were telling me a story about something that your daughter said about the what ifs.
Oh, yes. So I've, as you may be gathering, is my daughter and I really enjoy sharing with each other. And she's only 9, so I'm hoping this will continue on into the teenage years. I'm hopeful. But the other evening, it was bedtime, and we were. She likes to ask me about the calls that I have and how were the conversations, whether it's running a session with a team or with an individual. And we were doing sort of good nights and stories and things, and she was asking me about a call, and I was talking to her about, or sharing about, how sometimes and in that particular case, I think, was about helping a client, again, this seeing something from a different perspective and turning it from something that was feeling like it was feeling like it was just overwhelming.
Yeah.
And helping them to find the strength that exists within them to be able to entertain a different possibility. She just said to me out of the blue, "Oh, so it's like going from what if to what if? What if?" Just my heart swelled at that. It was the most beautiful summary of that whole process.
Oh, well, that sounds like whatever happens in her teenage years, that certainly sounds like you've got a business partner there for the future. Oh, that's lovely. Alannah, thank you so much for just sharing your insights and things. And to say resilience is, well, something that affects us, that is important, not just affects us, not just in the pandemic, but at any time. So I hope some of what sound quite simple techniques, but actually quite profound techniques, are something that people can take away and use. And for people that want to find out more about Alannah and the information that accompanies this podcast, I'm putting information in there about Kaleidoscope Approach so that you can contact Alannah or have a look at her website and find out more about her. So it just remains for me to thank you, Alannah, for taking the time to do this. And thank you for those of you who've been watching or listening. And please join me next week for who knows where I'll be in the world then. So thank you, Alannah. And thank you to those watching and listening. Bye for now.